Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up, NASCAR Cup Series at Texas Motor Speedway, 400 miles plus overtime, and a brand new winner for 2025. Formula One, plenty of passes, plenty of drama, a lot to talk about. It's Oscar Piastri now having more wins than Lando Norris, and Alex Palou, untouchable, unpassable, dominating the Barber Motorsport Park event for the NTT IndyCar Series, and of course Formula E at Monaco. I'm Joe Samaniego. With me we got Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight and Tanner Smith, editor from pitboxpress.com. And one of the big things I want to give a big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. You too can get your name on the leaderboard for investing in the Grid Network. These investors have been investing in us for quite some time, helping us pay the bills. And of course, you could do a one-time buy me a coffee, YouTube super chat. We'll add your name to the leaderboard. And of course, Jason right now leads, but we got a couple people we got to move up, including Matthew, who is now up to 3. Now, Tanner, let's get started with the NASCAR Cup Series at Texas, the WURTH 400-mile race at Texas Motor Speedway. Overall, I felt we talked about this on Thursday, Texas Motor Speedway, what kind of event, especially after the last 4 races. Overall, I felt this was okay considering the other events today when you look at IndyCar, Formula One. Passing was difficult, no denying that. If you had the clean air, you can make it work. We did see some drivers making it work. Tyler Reddick had one of the better cars. Ty Gibbs, who some folks had as pick a winner, was able to make things work. And then the strategy aspect surprised me. 2 tire stops working for certain teams, certain drivers. Then the mistakes. If you hit that bump on turn 4, you're going for the ride. Drivers like Brad Keselowski losing the back end, exiting turn 2. In the end, it came down to a very dramatic moment, a very dramatic battle between Michael McDowell, trying to get Spire Motorsports' first win, and Joey Logano. Logano caught him. McDowell made some overly aggressive moves, nearly putting him into the inside backstretch wall. That lost momentum for both them. Then when McDowell tried to get behind Ryan Blaney, lost it, crashed hard, raised any hopes of a good finish. Tanner, do you feel Michael McDowell lost sight of the bigger picture and threw away what could have been a potential top 5 finish?
I think that's a way to look at it, but I don't know if I agree with it. I think what happened with McDowell was just a very sudden moment in that race where he had a car on the exit of turn 2, which has been always treacherous at Texas Motor Speedway, regardless of configuration. You can go back to when they first ran this race back in 1997 on the original 24-degree banking in both turns, and you can see even back then that turn 2's exit was treacherous. We saw that throughout the race today on restarts, especially towards the end, where it kind of got a bit convoluted, we'll say. And I mean, yeah, one could say that McDowell probably threw away a, guaranteed top 5, absolutely at bare minimum a top 10 because it was only 3 to go by, breaking loose there at the exit of turn 2 when he crossed into Blaney's wake and lost control of his car. But I just think with moments like this, they're just so sudden that when your car snaps in the next gen era, you don't really have a whole lot of chance to catch it. So I don't think it was kind of like a concentrated effort to try to break out of the skid. I think it was just so sudden and immediate that McDowell didn't really have a whole lot of chances to respond and, hit the brake or, try to spin his car out rather than overcorrect it into the wall. I think that this particular moment was at most a second and a half before disaster struck effectively. So I can't really put that one on McDowell, more or less. I think that this is a byproduct of him not really being up close to the front and having more worn tires than the cars that he was racing against. So I would say that I think it'd be a little unfair to say that he just threw away a top 5, because we saw guys all weekend, not just in the Cup Series, but throughout all 3 national series, break loose out of turn number 2 in the wake of another car. So, yeah, this is just more of a byproduct to me of Texas Motor Speedway and all that has to offer than it has anything to do with Michael McDowell.
Yeah, Mike McDowell was on. He just did a 2-tire stop, so he had much older tires on one side of the car, and it just seems once the wake of Blaney's car hit, it was race over. Adam in the chat room, feel from McDowell had a really good shot at the win. Or that Spire team, I just feel like, again, similar to Phoenix, good qualifying effort. This could be a good day, but they just don't have the results to bring forward. Carson Hocevar was running good, got caught up in trouble. Again, accident in turn 2, coming through that backstretch. Spire is just, I feel like it is coming. They just, someday, a perfect race will come together. McDowell, maybe the road cars could be a good opportunity. Hocevar, he's knocking on the door. Now, Joey Logano, we know he's been pounded on the door to get a top 5 finish, to get a win, just get a top 10.
Kicked it down today.
He is now in the playoffs. Your top 5, essentially him, Ross Chastain, Blaney, Larson, and Eric Jones, a top 5 effort. But the big surprise, look at 6th place. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., 6th place finish, and he's above the cut line. Now, I remember I talked a little bit about him in Talladega, like just sort of the big picture. You're in the top 20 in points. Do you want to be that overly aggressive and cause a crash? His season, there's nothing spectacular. 1 top 5 finish, 1 top 10 finishes, 5 finishes in the top 20. But his 4 finishes outside the top 20, his worst is 25th at Darlington. And we know other drivers have crashed out, had issues. You just look at some drivers like, Kyle Busch crashed today. We could get into Keselowski later in the show. But is this a sign that Stenhouse is now doing a better job at racing, especially considering the limitation of his team? Or is this the consistency that he's displaying while some of the others really do not have that consistency?
It might be a little column A, a little column B. Let's argue column A first. The fact that this is Stenhouse being more consistent. I definitely think that he is finishing races a lot better this year than he probably ever has through 11 races. Oftentimes by this point in the year, he has gotten himself into some, unfortunate incidents and, damages his car, and he ends up poking around 10 laps down because he's completely damaged and wrecked. So he's definitely been doing a better job of keeping his car with all 4 wheels underneath it and remembering that the finish is more valuable than anything else. I think that's something he struggled with in the past that has often plagued his career. Now, if we're moving into the consistency of others, I think that's another valuable token as well, and especially in a race like today's that you really couldn't predict, I guess, unless you looked at all the numbers prior to the race as far as the last decade is concerned, then you could say that this race was wholly and totally predictable, unfortunately. But to Stenhouse's credit, him doing a better job of finishing races means that other drivers aren't finishing races as well as he is. And as a result, that's why Ricky is currently in the playoffs. And I don't think through 11 races this season, especially with the complete renovation in ownership over at what is now Hayek Motorsports, formerly JTG Doherty Racing, I didn't think that in this new season with how little, sponsor backing they had as far as concrete backing is concerned, like they in the JTG years had Kroger to lean on and their, many partners. And I thought coming into this year with a new nameplate and I would assume some differences in the shop, that they would be struggling a lot. And to my surprise, they haven't been. So I don't really know what's going on over at Hayek and what's gotten into them, but I'd say one thing that is probably going to go overlooked is the fact that Stenhouse is starting to get rather old. He is 38, I believe. He is kind of aging under the radar because he looks exactly the same as he did 10 years ago. So I would say that's probably a factor in why people haven't been paying as much attention to him. But at the end of the day, Stenhouse has done a fairly good job this year. Hayek has definitely stepped up to the plate in their first year under this new mold, and you really got to tip your cap to them. They have been putting faster cars on the racetrack than I think we're used to seeing out of that 47 car over the past few years, and maybe some of those fruits are, starting to show. So again, hats off to the 47 team. I think that it's a combination of both Ricky's ability to finish these races being strengthened, as well as just in general, the whole Cup Series field is kind of a bit scatterbrained through 11 races, I feel like.
11 races in the top 16, whatever that team is doing, just bringing those consistent finishes. I mean, 25 being the worst at Darlington, the lady in black. But so few top 10s, top 5s is just amazing that the others have had that bad luck, good luck. I mean, where they're just putting it together, getting it done one race at a time. If that's the approach they got, it is working. Don't change it up.
Well, I mean, you got to think the guy that won today came in today without a top 5 finish coming into the event, and he was still 8th in points prior to his DQ last week, and then 11th after that. So I don't think finishing these races anymore is necessarily a true indicator of success as far as points attainment is concerned. But you've definitely got to look at that 47 team. They've made some improvements, and if they can keep this momentum up, dark horse playoff candidate.
100%, and especially with some of the unpredictable races ahead where Ricky is pretty good. The draft impact tracks, a lot of potential there. We saw potential today from Ross Chastain, second place finisher, and he made some interesting comments after the race. Essentially, he said he had no confidence in the car yesterday with the speed of the Trackhouse cars on Saturday being terrible. That all 3 drivers, himself, Daniel Suarez, Shane Van Gisbergen, feels the same about the current state of their equipment, according to Chastain. Chastain thanked his crew chief for making one adjustment to give him a shot to compete at the end, and added that he can't drive an uncomfortable car, which is very interesting because we know drivers have different styles, how they like their car, loose, tight, how they manipulate it. What do you think of Chastain's comments about Trackhouse as a whole?
He is putting words to what can be perceived, I feel like. In our Slack chat yesterday, we all kind of pointed to all 3 of the Trackhouse cars starting 25th or worse for today's race. And, lucky for them, they all finished the race this week. Not only that, they finished all in the top 25. Shane Van Gisbergen had what I would consider his best oval race of the year yet this past weekend in Texas, and he looked to be set up for a top 20 finish prior to that final restart. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know what happened, but he kind of fell behind a little bit there. As far as Daniel Suarez and Ross Chastain are concerned, one of them is a championship 4 finalist and has won 5 cup races for this race team. The other is a top 10 points finisher and has won 2 races for this team and has helped build this team up from literally nothing to what it is today. And yeah, I think we've all kind of poked holes in Trackhouse's image over the past year or so since their lack of performance has really started to show up. And frankly, it's been kind of disappointing, especially when you consider teams that came in around the same time, such as 2311, started to really hit their stride last year and made a championship bid themselves and ultimately fell short. But Trackhouse hasn't really kept up with them. And as far as the growth of the sport is concerned, I think that Trackhouse could be an integral part in helping the sport grow in, multiple different sectors of the fan base. And, they can really have an impact in the sport if their cars are good. And frankly, on Saturdays, they often look very much the opposite. So I think losing Ty Norris has definitely affected that team more than they'll probably let on, which is unfortunate, but that tends to be how things go when Ty Norris leaves the team. They get significantly worse. And as someone noted in our Slack chat earlier, a colleague has acquired Ty Norris since then and has seen a bit of a bump in performance this season. So I think that it would behoove Trackhouse and Justin Marks in particular to take a good long look in the mirror over the next couple weeks, especially as we enter All-Star Weekend, where we'll have an effective week off. And, really think about the direction of his team, because for all three drivers to say, hey, we don't come into any race weekend with a comfortable race car, that's never good. You want your drivers to feel comfortable, because if they're not comfortable, then they're not confident. So I think that if Trackhouse is looking to maintain its current level of competitiveness, where they make the playoffs every year with at least one car, and they make it to the next round of the playoffs and then hope to make it into the Final Four, then they've really got to start making sure that any sim time that's used helps get every, piece of the car comfortable and confident for each driver. Because I think that Suarez, Chastain, and SVG are all three very, very talented race car drivers. Two of them are champions in different racing divisions. So it's kind of a shame when you almost feel like Busch's massive sponsorship check that they write to Trackhouse kind of goes to waste when Ross is running an 18th. So I think a deep reflection for that team after Kansas is probably necessary, just to kind of gauge the temperature of the room and kind of see where they're kind of missing speed, because they don't really come out on Saturday with any speed off the hauler. So I think that needs to be really, really combed over and looked at.
It is something very interesting just seeing how this Trackhouse team just does not seem to have something going for it. Overall, we've seen the struggles of Shane Van Gisbergen, and we know he's a rookie. But even at Coda, I feel like that third stage, it was just, where is he? We know the strategy didn't exactly work out for his favor. Daniel Suarez, he looked great in Las Vegas. One position short of that win. Not really much anywhere, but today, pretty good day, finishing up there in the top 10 as well. But Ross Chastain hearing that, I think it got a lot of people, okay, there is something off with these cars. And like you say, Tanner, if your drivers are not comfortable, they can't feel confident in making a move that will work. If the confidence is not there, the performance is not there, and Busch, like you said, I mean, they left when Kevin Harvick was retiring. We're going to go with Ross Chastain because he was just taking a lot of the headlines, making the big moves. Of course, the Hail Melon really got a lot of people talking about him. It's just nothing there, and really going to be interesting to see if Trackhouse can start changing their progress, maybe going in the right direction. Kansas could be a good opportunity to see how things look for that organization. One thing, though, today I have to ask this. The third stage, we had all those cautions. A couple of big crashes out there, especially on that backstretch. A couple of cars getting some air. We saw Bubba Wallace as he was sliding down. He hit some of those bumps, and it looked like that front end almost came up a little bit. Clint Boyer even pointed that out. AJ Allmendinger, the front got airborne, but that was contact during the crash. Ryan Preece and Hocevar both got lifted up. And it just seems odd to me that I do not recall so often this bouncing effect almost, where it's tire to tire and somebody's getting a little bit lifted up in the air. I don't see a situation so far besides Ryan Preece at Daytona, but of course we know there's multiple factors with that one of a car tire to car contact and then rolling over. But is this something still NASCAR may want to look at? Because we know teams have different strategies set up and it's evolving.
I don't know if there's anything they can do this year to prevent this from happening. From what I understand, based on what I'm looking at with all of these crashes, is that because of the low profile tire, the shell of the car, the physical body panels of the car are positioned in such a way to help generate better downforce. So effectively, when the sheet metal, or it's not sheet metal anymore, it's I think it's carbon fiber. Regardless, when the body of the car is set on the chassis, there is a bit of an indent around the tire, and then when you're at the end of the front tire, there is an indent before the rest of the body continues. And what it seems like to me is happening is the cars, when they hit into each other, that tire is finding that tiny little bit of a ramp that is created by the body paneling and squishes it in to create even more, room effectively, and gets a little bit more momentum than we're used to with a traditional car. And I'm kind of confused how we didn't end up seeing this happen more often in recent years. Like, we've had this car 4 years, and this is the first year I can remember us like all having a collective like question mark about it. I don't remember until Ty Gibbs's, clash incident where he slammed into Justin Haley's right front and did a wheelie himself in the qualifying races. I don't remember us having this kind of a pause with this kind of an issue. So I don't really know how they'll go about fixing this. I don't think it's necessarily something to look at yet, but I also don't have any ideas on how to solve it. I just think that with how this car is constructed, how the manufacturers go about designing the body paneling of the car and the shell on the outside, I don't know how we go about fixing this going forward this year. So this would definitely have to be something they would have to look at going into 2026 when teams are not teams necessarily, but when manufacturers are submitting their, body specifications for 2026, this might be something NASCAR should take a look at.
It'd be great if NASCAR was to look at it, just see what's going on. And it is interesting. Like you said, we did not see this in past years. And really, it was Ty Gibbs the first time I recall thinking, wow, that was very unusual. And then this year, it has been occurring a bit more. And so be interesting to see how NASCAR falls with that. Of course, as you see on the screen, the results are now official. Tech is complete. No issues from anybody. No cars going to the R&D center. So no
God.
Disqualification. And encourage everyone, be sure, Grid Network TV, Matthew Bro is working on that article. He'll have that up. With that said, looking at the second page, Josh Berry, 32nd. His team was flawless on pit road. 2 tires, come out, get the lead, stay in the lead. I thought he had a good shot to get this race win. That second stage, everything was under control, but then he goes a bit too high, hits that bump, bottoms out, crashes the car. And we had saw a couple other drivers do the same thing. Josh was interesting. As he said on the radio, the prior lap, he went over it without an issue. Caught him off guard. Could Barry have done anything different? Because I really thought he had a good shot at getting the win today.
I mean, if you're comfortable racing up there and you accept the risk, then I don't think there's anything different he could have done necessarily. I do think that the short-term loss of time compared to what you could gain may have been a bad risk reward opportunity for him, but at the same time, I'm not the one driving the car. I'm not the one that feels what the bump does to the car every time I go over it, so I can't really speak on it from a driving perspective. But I did find it a little puzzling that he gave Cody Ware so many grooves below him in order to not be anywhere near him, basically, through turns 3 and 4. I don't really know why he was up that high, to be honest with you, Joe. But yeah, like I said, I wasn't in the race car. And like you said, he even said himself the lap before that the same thing happened and he was fine going over that bump. And then the next lap, it wasn't. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. And unfortunately, this time the Wood Brothers team was damned. But luckily for them, they do have a playoff spot already in their pocket. So while things like this last year would have been, devastating for them to be running up front and leading the race at Texas with a chance to possibly go out and win, this year they can lightly take it for granted, so to speak. They can rest on their laurels a little bit because regardless, they're going to make the playoffs. They already have a guaranteed spot, and now it's just about maybe collecting more trophies and more playoff points so they can advance further in the postseason. So while, yes, it's definitely a missed opportunity for them to not only lose this race the way that they did, but to tear up what was effectively a really good race car, that's going to hurt too. But at the end of the day, we have 16 more races in the regular season. Or 15, should be 15. They have 15 more races left in the regular season to go. So if I were the Wood Brothers team, I would just kind of shrug this one off and say, hey, we wrecked out of the lead. So it could be a lot worse. We could have wrecked for 21st instead of first. And while you never want to go out in stage 1, especially like that in the lead, or was it stage 2? Regardless, early in the event, you never want to really go out that way. But again, if you were to choose it, you were in the lead, you have data from being in the lead that you can pull from going forward, especially to some of these more intricate intermediate tracks like Kansas and Charlotte coming up. I think that overall it's going to sting, but it could be worse. They're in the playoffs, so they don't really have to worry about this poor result.
And by being in the playoffs so early, I think it goes to when we talked a little bit about Ricky Stenhouse, how he does not have the consistency, but big thing is if you get that win, you could have lousy consistency. You're in the playoffs. And in the case of Barry and that team, they have been running up front. They're having those bad luck lately. But maybe if they catch a break and start putting together right races, especially in the playoffs, they're going to be contenders without a doubt. Las Vegas, I know they got that circled. It's a matter of just putting themselves in a good spot for a win in the playoffs, because depending on how many different drivers win the race, it's going to be very interesting where they'll be seated come the start of the playoffs. Now, one big mistake that occurred on pit road, William Byron, he was in the pits, 2 tires, came out, made contact with Cole Custer, who was coming in. That ruined the front splitter, the nose. That essentially took him out of winning contention. He still managed a decent finish. I believe it was 13th as we pull up the results right there. William Byron's 13th place. But he had the lead, but didn't exactly have the car handling anymore. He is still the regular season championship leader ahead of Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin. Do you agree that Byron's team could have stopped him, tell him, hey, hold up, hold, allow Cole Custer in, and then go? But then, of course, you do that, you potentially lose one or two spots on pit road.
I would say that was a situational lack of awareness by the 24 team as a whole. I think when you are pitting behind somebody or in front of them, you should know what lap they are on and if they are going to be pitting with you. So with this kind of a situation, especially knowing that you're going to be taking two tires and you're going to have a shorter stop, and there are a ton of cars on the lead lap, I think the spotter and the crew chief need to communicate where the cars around them are going to be and when they're going to get there. In this instance, this definitely goes out to the spotter. The crew chief at that point in time is watching his crew perform and is trying to kind of orchestrate that chaos with the pit crew. So I can't really fault that one on Fugel, but with the 24 spotter, you need to know where the Cole Custer car is going to be while also keeping an eye on your driver and where they're at in the pit stop, especially with this being a two-tire stop, knowing that you're going to need to have a speedy and quick getaway to get out first. You need to know where that 41 car is going to be. And unfortunately today they took their eye off the ball and ruined their race because of it. So this will definitely be a learning experience for them. Hopefully the next time this happens, they'll be a little bit more prepared. But yeah, they ruined a potentially race-winning race car because they just weren't paying enough attention to their surrounding environment. And that's unfortunate. But they're Hendrick Motorsports. They're going to bounce back from this. So I really wouldn't be too worried if I was a 24 team. You ended up with a 13th place finish and good stage points today. So it really could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse situation for them. It just caught me by surprise, such a mistake from the 24 team. But as you said, I think particularly that spotter, because Rudy Fugel, he's watching the pit crew, making sure everything goes right in case somebody raised their hand because they didn't get the lug nut all the way. Spotter is just one of those deals. Tough break, and of course, he was going with two tires, so of course it was going to come out a lot faster. It was a 4-tire stop. Nothing probably would have happened. Two drivers that stood out for the wrong reasons in the race. Kyle Busch. My goodness, Kevin Harwood just talking greatly about how he's running the top 5, and then he just crashes. It's like, oh my gosh, that is the commentator's curse demonstrated for everyone. And then Brad Keselowski crashed, just lost control, exit turn 2, and is 32nd in points. Just not the year.
No.
Now, last year we saw Austin Dillon, Harrison Burton. They both won, and they were both past 30th in the points. Now, we know what happened with Austin Dillon, the way he won, and NASCAR's actions, but Harrison Burton got in the playoff, and that raised questions about the win and your in format, especially for a team that far behind. We keep saying, oh, it's just a matter of time until Keselowski gets out of this slump, but I have to ask, though, if Keselowski were to, say, win in Kansas next weekend, just right place, right time.
Yeah.
If that was to happen, he's in the 30s. Would he sort of face the same scrutiny that Harrison Burton faced after he won at Daytona, securing a spot in the playoffs?
No, and I don't think it would be deserved if he did, because it's a complete misalignment of expectations. So Brad Keselowski is a champion of the sport, as we all well know. He's a 30-some-time race winner in the Cup Series, is an Xfinity Series champion, and for the last 2 seasons, he has made the postseason, including his most recent win around this time last year at Darlington. So we haven't even gone a full year yet, technically, on a calendar, without Brad Keselowski winning a race. And I think that team is currently just going through some growing pains by adding its third team. Obviously, Ryan Preece was running very well today. Brad, at times, found himself fighting for a top 10. And obviously, it ended up coming undone, unfortunately, but that'll happen. As for Harrison Burton, to kind of compare the two instances, Harrison Burton had not at any point in his Cup career really performed at any level of measure, and he all of a sudden wins a plate race. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, well, at least they earned a victory at a racetrack that they actually have a chance, because otherwise at the other 30 other racetracks, they're not going to really have much of a chance at victory. Whereas with Brad Keselowski, a former champion, has won at a multitude of different tracks and layouts, you kind of expect that team and that driver to have a certain level of performance that they just haven't been able to meet yet. So I think that it would be disingenuous to kind of compare the two if hypothetically that were to happen. Because, like I said, Brad has so much experience, so much success at this level, even with this race team. It's just that I think with adding that third team, they've just kind of fallen behind on the sixth crew. Not only that, this is the first season with a new crew chief in Jeremy Bullins, which, again, not a new crew chief to Brad, but it's a new crew chief to RFK as a whole. So they're still trying to, I would assume, figure out how they're sharing data and how they're making their cars fast. I'm sure they're still trying to hammer all that stuff out. So if I were the 6-team-1, I wouldn't really be too concerned right now, because you do kind of have that get out of jail free card, assuming you do win a race. And at the same time, I just think that comparing the sub 30th place points running of a former champion who owns and operates his own race team and runs his own cars to a 24-year-old that to that point had only 3 top 10s to his name in his whole career in 100 races. I just don't think that'd be really fair to Brad. So I respect the question, but I don't think that I don't think it would be fair to Brad to compare him to Harrison last year, because I just think the circumstances are entirely different.
And I think you bring up a lot of good points, because a lot of people would say, okay, you got somebody in the 30s in the stands getting a win. But as you said with Brad Keselowski, this isn't a person that has shown really not much improvement in their career and are stuck with lousy equipment. Is one of those deals I think Keselowski can eventually turn things around. I mean, it's just going to be those little steps. We saw Ty Gibbs. He was in the 30s. He has turned things around. I mean, looked like a winning contender today even. Just a matter of time. And then, of course, Ryan Blaney. He's been turning his luck around. Now Team Penske, they have a 2-week winning streak. The 2 last week, the 22 this week. When you look at 21, which is prepared at the Penske facility, they already have one. So could Blaney make it 3 in a row for 2, 22, and then 12 at Kansas?
I wouldn't put it out of the question. Ryan Blaney has had a number of strong runs at Kansas, but not a whole lot of strong finishes at Kansas. And I think that part of that has been from driving a Ford, which, as we all well know, at these intermediate tracks in the first few years of the next-gen car, they didn't really have a whole lot of pace, just as a complete manufacturer unit. So I think coming into a race like Kansas, where a driver like Ryan Blaney, who is notorious for being strong on long runs and conserving his tires, coming to a racetrack where you can spread the groove out at Kansas from the apron to the wall, giving Ryan all those different grooves, giving him a good draw in the qualifying order next week, because his finish was good this week. I think all of that combined will definitely help propel that 12 team and put them in a good position to contend at Kansas. But at the end of the day, they really just need to work on pit road, because though today they weren't, really under any threat and were able to not lose a whole lot of track position, they've got to continue that. You can't just have one good race, pat yourself on the back, and then go out and do everything like you were doing the first 10 weeks where you were losing positions. So I think that if the 12 pit crew can keep up with the 12 driver and the 12 engines can keep up with the 12 car, I think they'll be in good position next week. But again, this is a race team. It's not just one driver. So all members of the team and all components in the race car have to cooperate for 400 miles at Kansas for you to go out and win, sometimes more than 400 miles if it goes to overtime. So I wouldn't be surprised if I saw Ryan Blaney win next week. It would be a very funny thing if Penske went 3 weeks in a row to win, but at the same time, we have seen Fords not really perform at this track in the next gen era, so it'll kind of be a bit of a toss-up. I don't think the Fords were the strongest today, and they still found a way to win, so maybe they can make up the speed deficit next week and put themselves in even better position and come out with maybe even a 1-2 finish for Penske rather than just having, one driver really represent the entire squad there at the end and come out with the win.
Roger Penske would love to see a 1-2-3. That would be great. Even better if they had the 21 up there as well too, because of all the effort that team has been putting into those cars. And of course, NASCAR going to be at Kansas next weekend, so we'll be previewing them next weekend right here on the Grid Network. Kansas, I think it's going to be a fun, welcome race for everybody. With that said, let's bring in a Kobe to discuss Formula One in Miami, the Miami Grand Prix. The rain never showed up, but we still had a race that put on quite a show.
Yeah, and for once, we actually didn't need rain, for it to produce a somewhat exciting Formula One race. And it was an eventful start to the Miami Grand Prix, which saw Max Verstappen draw criticism once again for his defensive driving tactics. Lap 1, turn 1, Lando Norris got pushed wide and fell to 6th place. Oscar Piastri got around Kimi Antonelli, had a big battle for the lead with Verstappen. Piastri finally passed Verstappen and gave the Red Bull driver a little room. Some people are upset because we're seeing the move from lap 1 occur more and more often from Verstappen, and to be fair, other drivers as well. It's almost expected if you're side by side, but not the lead car, you'll just get pushed off the track. Joe, has this really become a problem for the race director to finally address?
I think it's getting to that point where the drivers, the race directors at their next meeting should discuss about what do we want as good racing, because when the commentators are saying, oh, this is good racing, just essentially taking that corner, going wide and pushing your opponent off the track, is this really good racing that we want in Formula One? I get it. Ayrton Senna was known for making it where if you were racing against him and you were in the corner, he left you with two choices, lift or cause a crash. But we're seeing this just more and more. Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri essentially did it as well too. Charles Leclerc. I mean, everybody's racing like this. We saw the Williams really squeezed the Ferrari right up against the wall to the point where they gave room because they just knew it's like if they squeeze more and they crash into the wall, they could take you out as well too. So I do think this is something the race director needs to talk about. Like, hey, we gotta address this because this is not exactly putting on that great of a show. It makes it tense when you have them going side by side in the corner and you know there could be contact. But do we want that all the time? I mean, I get it. Max Verstappen does not want to lose that position. Nobody wants to. But this is your default move? I mean, what happened to just trying to get someone to go wide, you make the pass. Someone breaking a little too early and you just outbreak them like what Darren Carter used to do. We can't just have it where everyone's move is run the person on the outside wide. That's not good racing, in my opinion.
I totally agree with you, Joe. I have been very vocal over the years that this style of racing needs to be outlawed and punished in some way. And for some reason, it's been a decade of Max Verstappen driving in this sport at the highest level and doing this exact same maneuver. And frankly, it's getting very old. I think that when you see other drivers do it to Max, it's really probably like a 3-to-1 ratio where he's done it to them 3 times. So they finally get the gumption and the opportunity to do it to him and pull it off, which is what we saw at Jeddah not too long ago with Piastri, as Joe kind of touched on. So, yeah, I think that he should have been penalized this afternoon for what he did to Lando Norris. I mean, they were effectively wheel to wheel going into turn 2, and Max Verstappen just drove like there was not a single car within his vicinity. And I just, as a fan of Red Bull, to those of you out there that are, I don't know how you stomach it. Like, you cannot possibly tell me that that is something you find to be an appealing trait of Max Verstappen and his racing style. Like, it frustrates me because I'm someone that really enjoys side-by-side, wheel-to-wheel racing, and it's part of what draws me to IndyCar and to a lesser extent NASCAR, and it's something I would love to see more of in Formula One, but more and more I just see drivers pushing each other off the track or guiding each other off the track in some cases without actually making contact. So I would really like to see something done about this. I think the fans would be more receptive to drivers that are willing to leave each other racing room and really battle it out side by side rather than just braking at the latest possible point so only you can make the corner and the driver beside you just has to figure it out. So, yeah, I just have a feeling that if we continue to allow this to go on, it's going to turn dangerous and potentially worse. And you're going to end up with a lot of wrecked equipment, and nobody really wants to see that. Nobody likes to see millions of dollars scattered across the racetrack in multiple pieces. So I think for Formula One's brand, for the kind of relationship the drivers have with each other, I think that something should be done about this to outlaw this kind of maneuver and penalize it. But I don't know when the next summit for Formula One race stewards is. So I guess we'll just have to wait for that to happen to see if any adjustments are made.
Yeah, it would be nice to see them address this, but sadly, I don't really have the confidence that this is going to be something very high on their priority list in the weeks and months ahead. But yeah, it's really interesting to see that this has really become the norm in Formula One. There's a lot of give, but there's not a lot of giving it back. And like you're saying, Tanner, if this continues to be the precedent F1, that if you're the car ahead, you can just shove someone off the track and get ahead of it. At some point, someone's just going to get sick of this. They're going to get fed up, and they're going to give it back. And like you're saying, they might have a bigger problem on our hand with some torn up race cars, even worse, someone getting hurt in those cases in retaliation. But thankfully, it seems like most F1 drivers keep a level head inside the race car and understand that in an open wheel car like this, you can really get someone seriously injured. So we don't really see a lot of those crazy shenanigans you see in other racing series, because these F1 cars really fast, and you definitely don't want to see anyone get hurt. And looking at Lando Norris now, he ended up recovering to a second place finish, but he had nothing for his McLaren teammate Piastri. Now Piastri has more wins, Grand Prix race wins, than Lando Norris. 6 wins compared to Norris's 5. Norris could still claim the points lead after the next race at Imola, but now that Piastri has 3 consecutive wins, a championship lead, and more wins than him. So Tanner, I know you've been beating the drum about this all F1 season, about the state of Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris and comparing these two drivers. And after what you've seen in Miami, is Lando Norris starting to look more like the number 2 driver? Because Oscar Piastri, as he continues to succeed, win these races, it looks like that he is taking a massive step forward, while Lando Norris is, just he's kind of like stayed where he was.
Yeah, I think that Lando Norris and the results are really starting to prove that Oscar Piastri is the true number 1 driver at McLaren, and McLaren should probably start treating him that way. And that's not a slight necessarily to Lando Norris, or at least it's not meant to be. I just think that with the lack of winning results and the fact that any time that Piastri has been put in a position where he has to pass Verstappen to win the race, he has done it, and quickly. Whereas if Lando is put in the exact same position, he lollygags behind Max at a second and a half behind for the entirety of the race, like he did at Suzuka, while holding his teammate up. I think that if Oscar doesn't spin out and get beached at Australia in his home GP, and if they had orchestrated the swap between Piastri and Norris at Suzuka before, well, I guess they never did it, but had they done it at around like lap 18 to lap 20, like they were initially talking about, we could be talking about Oscar Piastri having 6 straight wins to start this season. That's not an exaggeration. Oscar Piastri only ran off the course with Lando Norris at Australia because he was so close to him. So I think that Lando Norris really needs to dig deep within himself over the next month or so and really perform at the highest level he possibly can until these upgrades can get in, because if the performance of Oscar Piastri continues, I think that it'll be really hard to catch him as the calendar draws close to the end.
When you start running out of time of catching the driver ahead of you, that's just going to make it easier for McLaren to say, hey, we're getting down to the end. They're going to start focusing on when they could get a championship wrapped up. For Oscar Piastri, start making those decisions. And once those decisions start taking effect, essentially it's almost game over at that point, because really you're not going to have your number 2 driver then start trying to beat the number 1 if they could race each other and cause a trouble with the two of them getting together. So I think overall, for Lando Norris, the best thing to do, just run your own race. I feel like he makes some of these little small mistakes that cost him opportunities. That first corner with Max Verstappen, I think everyone knew what was going to happen. Just one of those deals where, okay, if you had just given up, that one position to Max, potentially you may still be ahead of Oscar Piastri. Because remember, Oscar Piastri started 4th in this race. A lot of things could have gone differently. He still has a fast car. I just think it was just too much for that first corner from Lando Norris, putting him in such a bad spot and then making his race worse, falling to 6th, having to work his way towards the front. He did a great job, but that just allowed Piastri to just pull away, no issues. When we go to the next race at Imola, we know how that first corner is as well too. You got a little bit of a bend, then the first hairpin corner where you're going to make a left and then a right. So if you're side by side, in theory, you could go through those S's side by side and see who gets a better launch out. But the way things are going, Max Verstappen's there, somebody's going to end up off the track, or who knows what's going to happen. But I just think that's part of the problem too, is when you have it where it's just run the other person wide, you just ruin their race to the point where they got a lot of work. And just because they had a fast car, that's what helped Lando got in. Because Mercedes had a decent car, Ferrari didn't show up, Williams, they don't have much on the McLarens. That's a big thing that kept Lando in it today, and I think he's running out of time. I think he's going to start getting the number 2 treatment.
Yeah, and for Lando Norris, that if that ends up happening, that's going to be an extremely humbling experience for him, because Lando Norris, he's ever since he's been in Formula One, he seems like that he's this driver who McLaren has always seen as their top dog. Now you have someone like Oscar Piastri coming in, who's basically still in his thunder, and Oscar's taking off while Lando is trying to play catch up. And I think in the next few race weekends and a few months ahead, we're going to learn a lot about Lando Norris's mental state when it comes to being behind the wheel of the race car. Like if Oscar Piastri, continues to win these races and his championship points lead, grows, like I want to see how Lando is going to handle this. Is he going to put his head down and keep fighting, continue to do the best he can do, or is he going to crumble and completely fall apart with Oscar Piastri, pulling further ahead? But right now, Piastri is on track to, stake his claim that he's the number 1 driver at McLaren. And then Lando Norris is going to have to play second fiddle. So there will come a point when Lando Norris is leading the Grand Prix, Oscar is second, Max is third. And then McLaren's going to have to be like, Lando, we're so sorry. You know, we know you're doing a great job leading this race right now, but in order to maximize points and keep Max at bay in the championship, we're going to need you to pull off to the side and let Oscar go by to win this Grand Prix to make sure we're maximizing points. And as a driver, that's not something you want to see. I think, you know, most fans don't want to see team orders as well, but at some point during the season, if Oscar Piastri is, you know, starting to pull away and if Max Verstappen is battling him for the championship there in second place, they'll need Lando to be a team player there. Of course, he'll, you know, obviously listen to what the team says in those circumstances, but it can definitely, you know, do something to you mentally as a race car driver. So a lot going on for Lando Norris in these next few race weekends ahead. Really critical time for him. And while Piastri controlled the race up front, behind him, drivers were battling for multiple positions. George Russell claimed third after a perfectly timed pit stop during a virtual safety car. The Williams drivers raced each other in Ferrari, and Alex Albon ended up getting a solid fifth-place finish. And the rain never showed up despite many concerns about the weather. I believe at one point they came on the radio and said rain would be coming in 20 laps, and then it ended up missing the track altogether, so ended up getting a dry Miami Grand Prix. Joe, were you surprised by the amount of racing we saw in the midfield, and do you see signs of improvement with this Miami International Autodrome circuit?
It is showing improvement from the first years each year. This year, I think it was another improvement. Big thing, of course, is the competition. I think is really close this year between the teams. You got a Red Bull team where Max does not have that great of a car. So he's battling with the McLarens, with the Mercedes. He's still ahead of the Ferraris, but the Ferraris are not where they should be. They were battling with the Williams. I mean, we even saw a Haas racing Esteban Ocon against them. So overall, I think while the racing has been improving because this track is being used, you know, from the first year, each year afterwards, it's also a little bit of the competition where we're seeing everyone because it's still very close. McLaren clearly has the best car. They're the fastest 1-2 finish. George Russell's there, but we see how with Kimi Antonelli, Max Verstappen, they could still contend against with him. Ferrari, they're Ferrari. I mean, we really just, they're either going to be good up towards the front or they're just mid-pack and you're just wondering what's going on. Williams, they're showing up. Great effort, even though it seems like Carlos Sainz seems to be really unhappy after this race. Well, let's not count out the racing bulls, especially Isaac Hadjar, who has put together good races. He could have gotten points if the penalty for 5 seconds did not, well, he essentially missed that window being a little bit later. But overall, I think the combination of the data for this track, we're going to be coming here to the year 2041 for sure. The competition level, it has increased. I think that's why we got a pretty good show overall for the Miami Grand Prix.
I was definitely impressed by how well the track raced today, especially considering we had, you know, all the mess that we had yesterday with the wet and all that. That said, I was particularly impressed by how it seemed like everybody down the grid could find speed here, except for the kick team, obviously. But it's been kind of hard for them to find any speed anywhere. But as far as like the quality of the racing, it was really nice to see battles pretty much throughout the race among multiple teams. And, you know, whether it was outside the points or for the points, the battles were just as fierce. And, you know, drivers weren't really afraid to get their elbows out this weekend, even in the sprint race yesterday, as we'll touch on in our next question. But yeah, I was thoroughly impressed by the quality of racing I saw this weekend. That said, there were some renewed calls, not only from drivers, but from fans this weekend, especially on Saturday, about how dangerous this track can be when it's wet. And I think those concerns really shouldn't be swept under the rug and should be kind of, you know, inspected a little bit further, especially if we're going to be coming to this track for the next 15 years. So, yeah, I was definitely impressed in, I believe this was the 4th year of this event. I was definitely impressed by its 4th showing. I think this was the best race that they've put on yet, because last year's race was kind of mired by that goofy safety car situation that kind of ruined the race for the win. But yeah, I definitely look forward to going back to Miami next year, especially as someone that is a Miami Dolphins fan in football. This race takes place right outside of their home stadium, so it leads to a lot of fun social media posts and activations between Dolphins players and F1 drivers that definitely charms me a good bit. So yeah, I am looking forward to going to this track next year rather than dreading it, but I still think, as far as the safety factor is concerned, there are some improvements that could probably be made if they look hard enough.
Yeah, and speaking of the Miami Dolphins, a race winner, Oscar Piastri, he got to spend a little time with Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson, who was, famously known for not just being a good NFL player, but doing the gritty. If you saw Oscar Piastri get out of the car, he actually hit the gritty, which was something he probably should not do. Kind of reminds me of when they added the gritty to the Formula One video game, which is very cringeworthy. Yeah, so maybe that'll be a one shining moment once we get to the end of our show for someone, Oscar Piastri, attempting to hit the gritty there. But getting back to what we were talking about, I was quite impressed by the racing we saw at the Miami International Autodrome, because so far, in its history, we really haven't seen, a lot going on there in terms of the on-track product. But this was the first year I'm thinking, hey, maybe they were smart to sign this race for the next, however long, well over 10 years. I believe it's the longest tenure, track on the F1 calendar now, set for the future. So maybe they're finally starting to find their stride with this racetrack, and maybe they'll make some changes to it over the years, as we've seen with other street tracks as well. Because Albert Park, Australia, they made some changes to that. They also made some changes to Singapore as well to try to improve the on-track product. So maybe they continue to work with it. But based on what we've seen so far in the short history of this Miami Grand Prix, I think we can say that this was, a solid Miami race by, this new track's standards. And the racing throughout the midfield was really, really intense. We even saw Carlos Sainz, getting into Lewis Hamilton on the final lap, final corner there. So they were pushing, going all flat out until the checkered flag. And now looking at the last two finishers of the race who were not retirements, Aston Martin drivers Fernando Alonso, Lance Stroll. Alonso's, terrible season continues, still hasn't scored any points, and had a big crash yesterday after Liam Lawson crashed into him. Stroll sat for the sprint race, the car just doesn't have the pace. And, considering the team struggles, and Stroll and Alonso not doing much to start off this season, the rumors are picking up about their future at Aston Martin. Some of the rumors suggest that Yuki Tsunoda could, be leaving Red Bull and coming on as a Honda-backed driver. As we know, Aston Martin's going to have the Honda power unit starting in 2026. And another rumor, possibly Max Verstappen opting out of his Red Bull contract to come over to Aston Martin, to be in potentially a better car next year, with Adrian Newey designing the 2026 Aston Martin car with the new regulations coming online. Tanner, do you believe both Aston Martin drivers might be replaced next year, and especially Lance Stroll, since his father, Lawrence Stroll, owns the team?
I think it'll be hard to get Lance out of that car, considering, as you just mentioned, Kobe, his daddy owns the team. And as we have learned anything from talking about NASCAR, if your daddy owns the team, then you're probably going to stay there a long time. Now, as far as what I think racing-wise should be done, if you have the opportunity to sign both Max Verstappen, the 4-time defending world driver champion, and Yuki Tsunoda, who, though he hasn't had the greatest year thus far in the Red Bull entry, I do think that he has a very high ceiling in this sport and could be someone that gets multiple race wins eventually. I think if you have that opportunity, you should absolutely take it, considering what your current crop looks like. As far as Fernando Alonso is concerned, he signed a 2-year extension last year that extends through 2026. So I think it'll be hard to move that contract or to, God forbid, cut him, which would cost probably a significant sum of money. I also just think that we're starting to see the end, unfortunately, of Fernando Alonso. He tried to do the Verstappen on Liam Lawson going into the hairpin, and Liam Lawson barely stayed on the racetrack, and ended Alonso's sprint race and effectively any chances he had at having a good run this weekend because they had to repair that car overnight. So, yeah, it was rather unfortunate to see Aston Martin's performance this year. They have not been good anywhere. And I just feel like when you have, and I've mentioned this about Richard Childress racing in the NASCAR Cup Series, when you have an anchor in one of the cars, it's really hard to make the other car go faster. So if Aston Martin and Lawrence Stroll have any faint chance of making this team quick outside of adding Adrian Newey, then definitely adding 2 better drivers in your seat would certainly be a big help in that. And unfortunately, that might include having a very tough conversation with your son.
Overall, when it comes to this team, if they were to get the opportunity to have Max Verstappen, Yuki Tsunoda, they have to make the tough call to Lance Stroll and say, hey, we're bringing in 2 new talented drivers that are going to make a big difference. There's World Endurance Championship. We know Aston Martin's looking into that. That could be another great opportunity for Lance Stroll. He's done sports car racing in the past, including the Rolex 24. But I do think they have to start thinking about, okay, Alonso's not having that good of a year. Would Alonso even want to stick around if it was given the option? If he's just not having fun, say, hey, I had a good run. Maybe it's time for me to step away. Especially if you got 2 talented drivers potentially from the Red Bull camp coming over. It just one of those deals. I think when it comes to this team, if they're putting all the chips in for 2026, I think they have to consider looking at 2 different drivers. I think Alonso's just getting older. Been following him a long time. I just do not see him being a long-term part of the Aston Martin future.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if Lawrence Stroll, is a good businessman, and if you have an opportunity to bring someone like a Max Verstappen over to your team, you have to, you can't let your personal feelings, and bias get involved. You have to be like, what's best for Aston Martin? And we already know the obvious question, having Lance Stroll on your team is not best for Aston Martin. It's obviously if you have a multi-time Formula One world champion who is available, you need to do what you can to sign him. Because, at Red Bull right now, Max Verstappen, is doing the best he can, with the car that he's giving, probably one of the worst Red Bull cars that he's ever driven with this team. And if you have an Adrian Newey, who's designing next year's car, and you have Honda, Aston Martin coming together, and Lawrence Stroll is continue to, build up this team for the future. There's a lot of exciting possibilities there, despite, a dismal 2025 season this organization is having. I think it's safe to say that 2025 is a complete write-off for Aston Martin, that, they'll just do whatever this year and, just survive the year. And next year, that's when the expectations are going to be out there. And you have an Adrian Newey design car. You have Honda, who's won the world championship, with Red Bull. And there's just a lot to be excited about for the future, long term, although short term doesn't really look that good right now. And Fernando Alonso, I would not be surprised if he decides to call it a career at the end of the year, because it's just been a completely frustrating experience for him to start off this 2025 season. It doesn't look like it's going to get better anytime soon. And Lance Stroll, he's probably going to be in F1 realistically until he decides to say, I don't want to race Formula One anymore. So I guess you can say that, he's guaranteed a Formula One seat as long as Lawrence Stroll is on our team, or Lance just basically gets sick and tired of it. But we'll definitely be following the situation with Aston Martin throughout the rest of the year, because I'm sure rumors will continue to pop up, especially, if there's more turmoil on the Red Bull side of things. And I believe we're done with our F1 section tonight, and we have another race to discuss that happened today. It was the IndyCar race at Barber Motorsports Park.
Yes, the Children's of Alabama Indy Grand Prix at Barber Motorsports Park. Georgina did not drop in the competition this year, but overall, the event headline dominated by the leader of the grid ranking, Alex Palou, never got past. The only times he didn't lead was during the green flag pit stops. in a caution-free race. First 4 races, 3 wins, and a second-place finish. He has a massive points lead over the competition. It is just this early in the season to have a 60-point lead over second place. He could miss the next race and he'll still be the points lead. That's just insane. Now, of course, he's not going to miss the next race. It's a race he likes, the Indianapolis Road Course. Kobe, can anybody beat Palou, or is this now a matter of Palou making a mistake and essentially costing himself a race win?
Well, Joe, right now it doesn't look like there's a single driver in this series that can beat Alex Palou. He's just had a magical start to the 2025 season. Even in his previous championship winning years, yeah, he was impressive in those, but this year it seems like he's on a completely different level. Him, that number 10 team, they have completely figured out this new configuration of car with the hybrid system, and he's probably one of the only ones who really like this hybrid system, because they have completely figured it out. And they're rolling off the truck with a great setups, and they show up on Saturdays in qualifying. Then when it comes race day, they execute, check the boxes on every single detail imaginable, right down to even the tiniest details. They're spot on. It doesn't seem like this team has a true weakness at all. I guess you could as we've said in the past, you could say maybe ovals are his weakness, but he still runs strong. He's just knocking on doors, just a matter of time before he ends up winning his first oval race in the NTT IndyCar series. But yeah, it seems like right now, it doesn't seem like there's anyone that can truly beat Alex Palou right now, because he's in a completely different planet.
Yeah, as Kobe so eloquently put it, he is definitely leaps and bounds ahead of the competition right now. And I do think, to Kobe's point, a lot of that has to do with Barry Wanzer and Palou's preparation during the week and just everything that they go through pre-race and leading up to the weekend. They're just clinical, man. Like they just do not have any sort of fear in their hearts. It seems like they go into every race weekend thinking they can win, and then they find a way to do it. They really went from, I believe, a 10th place starting spot at St. Pete to come away with the win because they had a lightning fast final pit stop in a race that was really hard to pass. And given IndyCar's switch to hybrids in the middle of last season, they have been the only team that I feel like has been consistently strong at every race that we go to. And it's really a testament to Alex Palou and Barry Wanzer's, like, not only relationship and just their general, their general prowess, we'll say. But like, I can't fathom how much better they are than like Scott Dixon, who, as we've discussed multiple times, is one of the best that's ever done it in this series. And it's just baffling to me how the 10 team is just like leaps and bounds ahead of both the 8 and the 9. And week in and week out, I just keep wondering, like, are we going to see anybody compete with this guy for the next several years? Because it's really starting to look like Jimmy Johnson 2006 to 2010 territory. So I think that right now, if I'm gauging the temperature in the room, it's really hard for me to imagine anybody putting up a fight against Palou if this is how fast he's going to be on the road courses. And heck, we haven't even been to an oval yet. And if he's going to continue to show this kind of speed at those types of tracks, then we're going to see something akin to Max Verstappen 2023, or I guess in IndyCar terms, that would, I guess I can't remember off the top of my head someone having this dominant of an IndyCar campaign. So I don't really have anything to compare him to, but yeah, right now, Palou is absolutely running the show and nobody's getting in his way to stop him.
He's been running the show, and you look at his championship runs. I mean, the first one went down to the last race, but then the second championship, that one, he wrapped it up early in Portland. third championship. Again, the championship race, but he sort of had that, especially once Will Power had his issues. This year is like, boy, it is just looking like he's really just elevating again to that next level to something we have not seen in IndyCar. Because before he wrapped that championship up in Portland, I believe it was 17 years. The championship had came down to the final race until Palou broke that streak. Now Palou is putting on something we have not seen in IndyCar in a long time. I know of all the years of covering the Grid Network and IndyCar, which is just known as different winners, very competitive, Palou is just doing something we have not seen before, and it'll be really interesting what he could do and who could step up, because we saw Christian Lundgaard stepped up today. We'll talk more about him. We saw Colton Herta. He stepped up his race week, and he was known for not having that great of a success here. Was running second, on track to have his best finish at Barber Motorsports Park. Key pit stop though, the car stalled. He went from second down to sixth, lost all those positions, just could not make it up. In the end, he finished seventh. That is still, unfortunately, his best finish at Barber, but we know that's disappointing. His prior best was eighth. Tanner, did the pressure get to Colton Herta on that pit stop, or was this the opposite effect and a careless moment that caused the stall?
I think it had more to do with the fact that his pit crew has dropped the ball already so many times this season that, and just in Colton Herta's career, let's even take it further back. I think that that's happened so often that he's almost like hardwired to like try to get out of the pit as soon as possible and as quickly as possible. And unfortunately today that just kind of bit him. I definitely think it was a bit of a rushed moment, a bit of a careless moment on Herta's part, but at the end of the day, I can't really fault him. Sometimes a stall just kind of happens, even if you do everything right, like you've done 1,000 times before. So I think I would chalk this up to it being more of a localized event than I would say it's, indicative of like what Colton Herta is capable of and something that is a pattern for him, because unfortunately it's usually the pit crew that's making the errors in the pit lane, but today it was Herta and it ultimately hurt that team and their results. So I really wouldn't look too much into it if I was the 26 team, and I would focus on making sure our pit stops are lightning quick and efficient. But yeah, if you're Colton Herta, you definitely have to look in the mirror a little bit tonight and be like, kind of let that one get away from us.
Yeah, I also think that this was just a unfortunate moment that happened to Colton Herta. I don't necessarily think it was like pressure getting to him, because like what was the pressure for? Alex Palou was, he was already heading down to Tuscaloosa, while everybody else was battling for second at Barber Motorsports Park. It was really just a race for second, because nobody was going to realistically challenge Alex Palou today. But it is an unfortunate situation for Colton Herta, because today seemed like a day where he could potentially, get up there and get a second place finish or win the rest of the best, so to say. But yeah, Tanner, you bring up a good point, about the Andretti crew letting Colton Herta down in the past, and then Herta's let himself down too, with some overly aggressive moves that ended up, taking away a good result from him. So yeah, not really the day that Colton Herta really wanted to see, but overall points wise, still a relatively okay day, because it certainly could have been worse.
Could have been a lot worse. Just one of those deals. I think, like you said, Tanner, just slide. We got to respond back, because still early in the season, but we know if Palou is making no mistakes, you got to be making no mistakes. One driver that has been making very few mistakes, Christian Lundgaard. He had a great day coming off from 7th to 2nd place. And we talked about this, Kobe, yesterday about the difficulty of passing, where most of the winners have started in that top 5. 7th place all the way to 2nd. 2 big passes that I felt defined his day and his effort. A pass on his teammate Pato O'Ward after pit stops. Then a mega move on the outside. getting around Scott McLaughlin, who a lot of folks would say was the second or third fastest behind Colton Herta. Third consecutive podium now for Christian Lundgaard, and his only finish outside the podium was at St. Pete's 8th. We just know the strategy there did not work in his favor. Now he is second place in the points, 60 points behind. Could he be the biggest challenger so far for Alex Palou?
Well, to be honest, Joe, like I said before, I don't really see anyone realistically challenging Alex Palou right now, but Christian Lundgaard right now. If I had to pick one, I think he's certainly one of them. Certainly one of the biggest. I don't know if I want to say one of the biggest surprises, but I certainly didn't expect him to get up to speed so quickly with his Arrow McLaren group. It really seems like Lundgaard has taken to this team like a duck takes to water, and he's really showing what his potential was. When he first got into IndyCar race, I think it was his first IndyCar race. He was still racing at F2 at the time. He put it on the second row, I believe, at the IMS road course when they had the second race there. I think they called it the Harvest Grand Prix. Lundgaard came into IndyCar, very impressive, and then spent the first few years of his IndyCar career, at Ray Hall, and made the switch to one of the bigger team, more competitive teams in IndyCar, and it's really showing that McLaren made the right decision to sign him because he's been so spectacular, on a day like today, caution-free race. So, and difficult to pass, cars all spread out. He made some great moves to get to where he finished, up there in the runner-up spot, and the team was flawless on pit road. It was just a really good day for that number 7 team. And if Christian Lundgaard, continues to put together days like this, and if Alex Palou has a stumble or two throughout the season, maybe Christian Lundgaard could be there to capitalize, but with the way he's running, I think it's only a matter of time before he parks it in victory lane.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more about Lundgaard potentially dropping into victory lane very soon. Could be as soon as this coming weekend in Indianapolis at the road course. But to kind of talk about Lundgaard's season to this point, he definitely has shown more speed in a second McLaren than practically anybody else that I can remember. For the longest time, it's felt like that Pato Award was up here and everybody else at most was about right here, about halfway there. You even had someone like Alex Rossi, who has multiple years in this series with top tier race teams and nearly won a championship, has an Indy 500 under his belt, nearly won last year's race as well. But even he wasn't ever able to really rally up to Pato Award's level in the 7 car. And then, obviously we have the whole song and dance with the 6 car up till this past year with drivers constantly flooding in and out of it since Felix Rosenqvist's departure. So as far as Lundgaard's title hopes are concerned, I kind of align with Kobe. I don't think that Alex Palou really has any sort of a true challenger at this point in the season. He would need multiple very hard stumbles, probably mechanical issues, if I had to take a guess, for anyone to even have a remote chance at fighting him for this title. But right now, Christian Lundgaard thus far has looked to be the best McLaren of the season, which I did not think I would be saying after 4 races, but he has definitely taken the fight to teammate Pato Award, friendly fight, obviously. And I think that long-term, Lundgaard's acquisition will be seen as a stroke of genius by Zach Brown and the entire Arrow McLaren team. And I think this is just the beginning. So I am a little concerned about how he'll look on ovals, though he has had speed on them in the past. But I definitely am optimistic for his campaign this year, and I think if he can keep this speed momentum up, he can definitely finish in the top 5 in points for the first time and maybe fight for the title next year when everything's hopefully a little bit more evened out.
The title fight is going to be very important. If he could put together a good race, as he said, especially the IMS road course, he could at least demonstrate that he is the second best out there, and just a matter of capitalizing when Palou makes a mistake. I remember in the preview show for the season on the round table, I talked about I think he was going to be one to watch. he has exceeded my expectations. I felt what he showed at St. Petersburg was sort of what I anticipated, and maybe a podium here, maybe a podium there. But wow, 3 consecutive podiums in the first 4 races. That is an amazing feat. And of course, he's doing that. I mean, passing all these vehicles. The race went caution free. So we still only have 1 caution. That was from St. Petersburg. Alex Palou was just unmatchable today. Nobody had anything. We still saw passes for position all around the track. However, that mainly occurred during pit stops. So strategy was a priority today. Everyone just about had the same strategy, just a matter of do we put sooner or later for the overcut, undercut. 5 times this race had only had 1 caution. This is the first time this race has gone caution free. Now, Kobe, I know we talked yesterday about Nathan Brown piece about how there's only been 2 passes for the lead, not counting pit road cycle stops, since this hybrid came in. Portland being one of them last year. Is this part of the trend, Tanner, with the new hybrid engine? Or was this just the nature of the race at Barber Motorsport Park, seeing how there's been races with few cautions?
I think that the racing at Barber Motorsports Park, even when there are less cautions flying, is still extremely good and has been in the past. I mean, 2 short years ago, let's not forget, we came here and for practically the entire event, Scott McLaughlin and Romain Grosjean had a pretty much race-long battle with each other that culminated with a pass late in the going that ended with McLaughlin in victory lane. And frankly, that was one of the best IndyCar races I've ever watched. And I think that Barber Motorsports Park, again, traditionally puts on great racing and offers a lot of unique passing opportunities that other tracks simply don't have. And watching the product today just further cemented what I have been unfortunately having to beat the drum about all season and through the end of last season, which is that I think that this hybrid unit has kind of disturbed the competition in IndyCar, especially on the road courses. And I think there's a pretty big reason for that. Not just one reason, but a couple. So, number one, though we added a hybrid unit that constantly regenerates power and, can be infinitely pulled from, more or less, we also kept push to pass. Don't know why we did that. I think that having push to pass alongside the hybrid makes everything a little too wonky, and I think they should just get rid of push to pass as a complete concept, because hybrid kind of takes the spot of that as is. Another big factor, and I think it's the more important and pressing factor, is that the super capacitor that we affixed to the Dallara chassis added 100 pounds to these cars, particularly on the rear where it was placed. And if you're a driver that preferred how the car prior to its implementation would slide out of a corner, adding 100 pounds to a fairly light race car is definitely going to be a significant addition. And I just think more and more we see that the drivers that were used to being able to control that slide out of a corner with the rear of their car are having to adjust, and they're having more and more trouble with it. Like, Joseph Newgarden was not a fight for a top 10 at road courses kind of guy until all this hybrid stuff got mixed into the bunch. And it's just really sad, because I think we all kind of looked at IndyCar as like the bastion of like pure, clean, wheel to wheel exciting racing, especially over the past few years. And man, the more I watch these races, the more it looks like we have F1 at home. And that's just really upsetting, because I didn't think we'd come out of this race weekend where we race at Barber, which again is one of my favorite tracks on the IndyCar calendar, and we go to F1 in Miami, which I haven't really had the highest of opinions of thus far. And I'd come out of the weekend saying, wow, that Miami race was really, really good. And wow, that Barber race was terrible. I didn't think I'd come into this weekend saying that at the end of it. And here we are. So I don't really know what we can do to make the racing better. I just think it's going to take time for some of these more seasoned drivers like a Scott Dixon, like a Joseph Newgarden, to adjust to the rear weight of the car that most of them have been driving for over a decade is completely thrown off. And it's harder to teach old dogs new tricks. So I hope that we can either have something change or the drivers can adjust a little bit faster. But yeah, right now it seems like the only team that really has it tacked down is the 10 team, and they have been letting everybody know.
Yeah, it seems like the number 10 team has everything figured out. And as I said earlier, maybe they're the only ones who like this current configuration of car, while everybody else, is just playing catch up. It's certainly been quite a disappointing start to the IndyCar season. And Joe Tanner, thinking back to all the on-track action we've seen so far, after Barber Motorsports Park, I can't tell you a single moment that's memorable to me, and that's really sad to say because usually by this point in the IndyCar season, heading into the month of May with the Indy 500 coming up, you usually have something memorable from the season to talk about before you get into the granddaddy of them all. But so far, I can't think of a single on-track moment that was very memorable to the start of this IndyCar season. And Tanner, to your point about the F1 race, I have to say I thought the F1 race was way more entertaining than what we saw at Barber. And that's something you don't usually say. Is usually we're saying that the IndyCar race was more entertaining than the IndyCar on-track product, beats F1. But I think on this weekend, I have to say the F1 race had Barber Motorsports Park on-track product beat hands down. And, that's something we didn't say a few years ago. So I think that the hybrid engine has definitely changed the racing in a major way, and it's been interesting to see some of the drivers, who were really excelling in IndyCar before they added this hybrid system. You mentioned like Scott Dixon or Joseph Newgarden, who have seemingly taken a step back, on these road and street courses. Seem like they're having a hard time. I guess I know this is the same DW12 chassis that we've had for well over a decade now, but in a way, similar like on the NASCAR side of things, like some of the drivers who excel with the Gen 6 car, when they got to the next gen car, we've seen some of them struggle as well, so like drivers like Martin Truex Jr., Kevin Harvick, towards the end of their career, when they switched to this 7th generation Cup car, they kind of had a hard time getting up to grips with that machine, or maybe it was just them aging, and falling off a bit. Who really knows? But we've certainly seen that on the NASCAR side of things. And I think in a certain respect with IndyCar, as you said, Tanner, they're having some of the veterans are having some trouble as well with this new system. And also, some of the drivers that this car is not, with the extra weight, it's not fun to drive. Like a Paddle Award, when Lee Diffie was calling the races, they always said that Paddle has those ninja hands. He lets his cars really loose. And, Paddle, he can take a loose race car and make something happen. And with the added weight like that, yeah, I think that, that's why, we've seen even Paddle Award, not perform, to the same level that we've seen him perform in the past because of the way, this car is to drive. And then Alexander Rossi, we talked about this yesterday on the pre-race show, Tatter, that Alexander Rossi was on the podcast saying that, IndyCar, this version of IndyCar is not fun anymore. It's just the way that the cars drive. It's an old chassis. The drivers that want it, want the next generation of IndyCar to have a lighter weight chassis, and they want to get back to the type of racing that IndyCar's been known for. And it's just been real unfortunate to see the on-track product take a nosedive. And also, I'm gonna read to you guys a press release I'm looking at. Tanner, you say you don't know what to do, like with the current package we have in IndyCar. Well, IndyCar has a solution that we're going to see this next coming race weekend on the IMS road courses. Yeah, and here's what IndyCar says in the press release, starting with the Sancerre Grand Prix on the IMS road course, that they're going to be changing the tire rules just a little bit. Instead of only running one lap on the alternate and primary compounds, now you're going to have to run 2 laps on each compound. And instead of only having to run one compound twice, now you're going to have to use it 2 times. So just add a different strategic element to the race weekend. There, in the IndyCar president Doug Bowles said that IndyCar is continually looking into ways to improve an already extraordinary on-track product, subject to opinion there. And he said Firestone is a terrific partner, and their higher degradation alternate tire has given strategists plenty to think about on road and street courses this year. We expect this update will challenge teams and drivers even more. So IndyCar, is obviously aware, that the on-track product isn't what it used to be, and so they're trying something new here, saying that you have to use the reds and the black tires twice, and you have to use them for 2 laps instead of one, to try to make the race somewhat more interesting from a strategic factor. I don't really know how that's going to play out, so I guess we'll see next race weekend how this works out for them. And the interesting part was Racer.com did an article about this, and I said that IndyCar floated this idea to the team owners during the off season, like yay or nay. And interestingly enough, Racer.com says that 70% of the team owners voted no, but IndyCar is doing this anyways. So we're just along for the ride.
The first thought with the using the tires now twice, I almost think it's going to be something we sometimes see in Formula One where there's a 3-stop race. They may go soft, and then the hard tire, or soft, hard, soft. It's going to be really interesting. It's I think essentially we could say everyone's hunting to try to catch Alex Palou. Will the race next Saturday be that? It'll be really interesting to find out what happens going forward at IndyCar, and of course we'll cover that right here on the Grid Network. Now, Kobe, we'll go to the last race series of the weekend, Formula E in Monaco.
Yeah, and it was the ABB F1 Formula E World Championship holding its Monaco doubleheader weekend on the streets of Monte Carlo. Oliver Rowland won race 1, which saw plenty of passing and drama. Then the very next day, second place behind Sebastian Buemi, who ended up snapping a 78 race winless streak. And after Monaco, Oliver Rowland extends his lead by 48 points ahead of Antonio Felix da Costa. And I don't know about you, Joe, but heading to this year's Formula E season, I didn't expect to be saying that Oliver Rowland is leading the championship by this much, and he wasn't even on my list of drivers that I would have predicted who's leading the points at this stage of the season. Formula E season is coming to an end, soon, so there's not really a lot of time for all these drivers to catch up to him in the standings. So my question for you is, are you surprised by Rowland's performance, and do you think he can run away with the championship?
I am very surprised by Oliver Rowland's performance this year, because last year we knew he had a good season. He unfortunately missed the race in Portland due to illness. That took him out of championship contention. But I always thought it was just going to be a matter of, okay, he's going to come in, he'll be a contender, but you still have Jaguar. They're going to be in contention. Envision, which uses a Jaguar powertrain. I really thought we will see a lot more different names up front. And if we were to talk about somebody that was going to potentially dominate a season, I would have looked at Antonio Felix da Costa, Pascal Wehrlein. I mean, they both got championships. They're both with Porsche. But what we're seeing from Oliver Rowland, it is amazing. He has just done a great job with that team. I think overall, he is a big surprise of the season. I think when it comes to Formula E, he could race everyone hard. The full potential we are starting to see now from him, because in the past, I would say he was one of those drivers like, okay, he's having those good races here and there. Now I'm convinced he is a championship contender, and I think he got a lot of potential still.
Yeah, definitely. I remember in the preseason before the Formula E season started, Joe, I remember you were saying you weren't completely confident, and Oliver Rowland, yeah, he had a, decent season last year, but in many respects, that was only one season. So, naturally you want to see if he can continue to do it. And to our surprise, he's continued to, perform at the high level that we saw towards the end of last year. Probably, he is, running the best that we've ever seen him run so far in his Formula E career. And if he can continue this consistency, get more race wins before the season ends, I don't see why he can't run away with the championship and be this year's Formula E world champion.
A lot of potential to be the Formula E world champion. Still quite a lot of races to go. And in general, a lot of races to let go in the grid ranking. Let's take a look at the 5th week of the grid ranking. And one of the big things, Alex Palou continues to lead. That is no shock. One of the things I'm looking at, Christian Lundgaard, Oliver Rowland, they both moved into the top 10. As you can see, Lundgaard in 7th and rolling. Now ninth, so 6 out of the 7 series in the grid ranking are in the top 10, and 2 of them McLaren driver Oscar Piastri and Christian Lundgaard. Now, Tanner, it's very interesting. We were discussing last week who is likely to win, Palou, Piastri. Well, both. So I guess that as a sort of no surprise, they're both really good at their level. But taking a look at Christian Lundgaard, now he's in the top 10. Do you feel he is the biggest surprise this season in any of the series, especially as we've seen in other series drivers that switch teams, but not has had a big turn in results like Christian Lundgaard?
Yeah, I would definitely say that Lundgaard has had a bit more of an uptick than most expected, especially at this point in the season. Normally, when you get with a new race team, and for Lundgaard in particular, a new manufacturer in Chevrolet, as he was coming from Honda, you tend to have a bit more of a harder turnaround, more or less. And frankly, it's been shocking to see how well he has adjusted to not only McLaren, but Chevrolet as a whole. So he definitely sticks out as somebody that is at the top of this chart that you probably wouldn't have expected to be here 4 races through the IndyCar season. But you also got to look at Oscar Piastri. He has definitely put on a clinic to open up 2025, and I think that most people coming into the season probably didn't have him pegged as winning 4 of the first 6 races. They probably had Verstappen having a bit stronger of a season to this point than he's had, or even Lando Norris having a stronger season, or maybe even Charles Leclerc having a stronger season to this point by, having Lewis Hamilton as a teammate to feed off of. And yet here we are, and Oscar Piastri is the leader of the World Drivers' Championship, and he is running away with multiple GP wins. And it's been, very validating for someone like me. As Kobe pointed out earlier, I've been beating the drum even since preseason that Piastri is probably the number 1 driver, or at least he should be at McLaren, and he's really starting to put the results together to back that claim up. So while I do think Lundgaard is probably most shocking, I don't think people had Piastri this high at this point in the season either. But both are very nice to see, and I'm sure McLaren is very, very happy with the results of their 2 young drivers.
Yeah, I think McLaren has to be proud of their drivers all across the board, whether it's in Formula One, IndyCar, even their Formula E program, which we talked about last Wednesday night grid tonight. Formula E program going to be coming to an end at the end of the season, especially the performance of their driver Taylor Barnard in Formula E. But getting back to Christian Lundgaard, I think that we, after seeing how his IndyCar career started comparing to where he is now, I think it's safe to say that Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing, been there in general, is really holding him back. Because he could only do so much with the Rahal car. Now we saw that impressive win on the streets of Toronto that he had, and I don't think a lot of people expected him to win there. But being able to muscle that car around the streets of Toronto and get that victory, very, very, very impressive. He's also had good runs on other roads and street courses. On the ovals, I'll say that we can't really judge how good of an oval racer Christian Lundgaard is, because we know the Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing oval program, has been underwater, in recent years, and they've shown certain improvements, on those tracks, but still not where they needed to be. So I think that given the fact that he was in the RLL oval program, it ended up hurting him quite a bit. But now he's with Aaron McLaren, and I think we can see him continue to excel. And like I say, I think it's only a matter of time before he gets a win later on this season. I don't think Alex Palou is going to win almost every single race for the rest of the season, but I think on a day, when Palou doesn't have the best car, Christian Lundgaard is one of those drivers who can rise to the occasion and get the win, because Lundgaard has started to establish himself as one of the top drivers in the entire NTT IndyCar series.
Establishing himself as one of the top drivers in the IndyCar series, and in the grid ranking, he is up there in the top 10. Taking a look at the rest of the grid ranking, of course, Marc Marquez down 11th. MotoGP is back next race weekend, as well as the Supercar Series still does not have a driver in the top 10. That series acquired That is not happening this year. Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, 16th and 17th, both of them quite a ways back. And Will Power, despite one DNF, no podiums, but two fifth place finishes and a sixth place finish in the 4 races, he got into the grid ranking today. We still have plenty of racing throughout 2025. So a whole lot of racing to go. With that said, we got to wrap it up. And we encourage everyone to chat room, share what is your one shining moment.
Yeah, time for our Group 1 shining moment from this racing weekend on this marathon of a show with all the racing action we've had to talk about this weekend. As Joe said, let us know down in the comment section below, either here live or on replay. What's the one thing that stood out to you the most? What was Formula E in Monaco, NASCAR at Texas, Formula 1 in Miami, or IndyCar at Barber? And we'll start off with you, Tanner. What's your one shining moment?
So there are 3 entities I want to award it to, but I'm going to narrow it down to one for the sake of brevity here. Dale Coyne's Renus VK, the 24-year-old driver, has come back to the IndyCar series with a renewed sense of competition this year with his new team, and he rode that momentum all the way to a 4th place finish today after making the Fast 6 yesterday, again in a Dale Coyne entry. I think that for as long as VK has been in this series, all the way back to 2020, I think a lot of people forget that he is still only, as I mentioned, 24 years old. There is still a lot of tread on this young man's tires as far as being an IndyCar driver is concerned. And I think that next year he absolutely deserves to be in a much better ride, and especially with how well he performed at Ed Carpenter Racing, especially in qualifying and during the Indy 500, I think that he could earn himself a much better seat for 2026, maybe even in the 3rd Penske car in replacement of Will Power. So I think that Renus VK's 4th place performance, though it wasn't a podium, it did earn my one shining moment this weekend, and hopefully he'll have stronger runs to come.
Renus VK, a great shining moment. Almost had that podium finish today. Something else. For me, my one shining moment is going to come from Formula E, Sebastian Buemi getting that win. Sebastian Buemi, of course, as we know, been part of Formula E from the very early on. Competed against Lucas Di Grassi for that first championship. Then he lost it to Lucas Di Grassi, came back, get the championship. Overall, Sebastian Buemi has been around a long time. He's still a very decorated sports car driver when it comes to World Endurance Championship. The last few years in Formula E, it seems like people have to start thinking maybe he is not able to get wins again in Formula E, contending for wins. He was trying to help Nick Cassidy get a championship. That didn't work. Envision, they're no longer Virgin Envision. They're not just the Envision team with the Jaguar powertrain. Getting that win in Monaco, you could tell that meant a lot to him. That's going to be a big boost in confidence. And overall, I think for Sebastian Buemi, that was a big moment overall. So Sebastian Buemi, that is my shining moment.
Yeah, and before I give my shining moment, I just wanted to say that Matthew Bro wanted us to share his shining moment, which was Legacy Motor Club getting 2 top 10s in the Cup Series race at Texas, which really shows how far this organization has come along from being a team, that was struggling at the back of the field to try to get things going under the new ownership group, involving Jimmy Johnson. It seems like, Jimmy has, continued to obviously work hard to improve his cars on this program. Seems to be, light years ahead compared to where they were last year at this time. So Legacy Motor Club continuing to move up the grid. And that's something that team has to be proud of. Going to be interesting to see how they continue to run in the weeks and months ahead. And my one shining moment is actually the same one as yours, Joe. So I won't go too far into that, but I saw the interview with Sebastian Buemi after that, you could tell how much it meant to him. Look, he was about to just burst out in tears and start crying. It shows you how, much this meant to him. He even said, I didn't think I'd ever win another Formula E race, just showed that he was overcome by emotions, real special. 70, I was surprised when they said it's like 78 race winless streak. The last time he won was, at a track, and at a race that doesn't even exist anymore, the 2019 New York City Prix in Brooklyn, New York. So it's been a long time since Sebastian Buemi has won a Formula E race. I remember during the early years of the Formula E World Championship, Sebastian Buemi, he was one of the top guys, going out there. Every Formula E race weekend, he was one of those guys, who you expect to win or at least be in contention for the win and contend for the season-long championship. And then, in recent years, Sebastian Buemi, it makes you wonder, as he's struggled, you wondered, is he that same guy? Is he starting to get up there in age and starting to fall off? And it just shows, Sebastian Buemi still has some left in the tank, that he's not completely gone yet in terms of talent. I just thought it was a really nice moment to see him, almost tear up there and get so emotional about winning in Formula E, because he didn't think he'd ever win again. And for him to go out there and do that, I thought that was a real nice moment to see.
Since 2019, good Lord, I'm thinking about all the things that have happened in the world since then, and to finally break through and win again, yeah, that would definitely make me emotional. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, 2019, and I think too often people sort of see like Formula E, oh, that's a series where it's just electric cars. They're just there. They're not really
or washed up F1 drivers.
Washed up F1 drivers, or they just really are just, it's not a big priority. Buemi showed this is something he's proud of, racing in Formula E, and competition level is always good there. And what an effort by him and that team this weekend at Monaco. And of course, we got more shows coming up this week. Grid Encore tomorrow. Got plenty of racing to recap there. Then Grid tonight, Kobe, Josh, and Matt will be on the air, as well as the latest from the Grid Endurance Performance Index. And then, of course, NASCAR preview, Kansas Speedway. That's going to be fun. IndyCar, they're racing Saturday at Indianapolis. We got MotoGP and the Repco Supercar Series. And, of course, pick a winner. You do not want to miss that. It is closing up. Matthew Bro leads Matt White by 1 point. He broke the 20-point barrier, but Matt is at 19 points, so encourage everyone. Grid Network TV, across social media, the hashtag Grid Rank It, Grid Endurance, and pick a winner. And don't forget, Matthew Bro will have his NASCAR recap coming up on the website, as well as Isha with Formula One Academy recap. So plenty of things going on right here in the Grid Network, all thanks to our Patreon investors, Colin Show, Mark, Ron, Dave, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network. For Tanner, I'm Joe, and for Kobe, thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.